Okay, welcome students. Welcome to lecture number 5, where we will be covering module 2 under subject indirect taxation. So module number 2, as we know, is about levy and collection of tax, in which we have seen what is the scope of supply, composite and mixed supply, levy and collection, composition, levy. So beginning with scope of supply, we had covered under section number 7. Composite and mixed supply we had covered under section number 8. Levy and collection we covered under section 9. Composition levy we covered under section 10. So today we will be seeing what is exemptions under GST, who are the persons that are liable to pay GST, and what are the several exemptions from tax that is given under GST. So before we understand what is exemptions under GST, let us first understand what is exempt supply. So students, exempt supply under GST means supply of goods or and services which attracts nil rate of tax, which are wholly exempt from tax, and non-taxable supply. So the definition of exempt supply means nil rate of tax. Now when I say nil rate of tax means those goods and services are covered under GST, but the rate of tax on such goods and services is 0%. So if the goods and services are being supplied at which there is a nil rate of tax, they also fall under the definition of exempt supply. That means they are under the GST regime. That means those goods and services are covered into GST. They have a rate, and that rate is 0% or nil rate of tax. Next, which are wholly exempt from tax. There are certain supply of goods and services where government is giving 100% exemption from tax. That means on those supply of goods and services, there will be no rate of tax, not even zero rate of tax, not even other rates of tax that are applicable in GST. They will be 100% exempt from tax. So if any supplier is supplying goods and services which are wholly exempt from tax, they need not collect GST. Next, exempt supply also includes non-taxable supply. Now, what is non-taxable supply? It means supply of goods and services which are not leviable under the GST Act. Either it can be under CGST Act or IGST Act. That means these goods and services are not falling into the GST ambit only. For example, you can say alcohol for human consumption. It is non-taxable supply because it is not falling under the GST. And 5 petroleum products, though it is non-taxable as on today, tomorrow at some date, particular date, if the government notifies that 5 petroleum products to be taxable, that will happen in the future. But as on present, they are non-taxable supply. That means no GST is levied on alcohol for human consumption and the 5 petroleum products like crude oil, diesel, petrol, aviation turbine fuel, and natural gas. So students, in short, what does exempt supply means? That supply of goods and services which includes nil rate of tax, which includes supply of goods and services which are wholly exempt from tax, and which also includes non-taxable supply. Now, let us move ahead. Section 11. Section 11 of CGST Acts talks about exemptions. So students, if government wants to give exemption from a particular supply of goods and services, what is the process? How it can declare exemption on a particular product or services? So the power of government to grant exemption from tax on recommendation of GST Council. So the government can exempt the supply of goods and services, okay, only on the recommendation of GST Council. You all know what is a GST Council. Okay, now either it can grant exemption by a notification or by a special order. Now when government is granting exemption by notification, how does it grant? The government may generally exempt supply of goods and services of any specified product or services only on the recommendation of GST Council by notification, students. And when it grants exemption through a notification, that exemption will be from effect from the date that is specified in the notification. Now, when it is granting exemption by notification, either it can grant exemption wholly or partially. Now, when I say wholly or partially, means absolute exemption or conditional exemption. Now, when I say absolute exemption, which means 100% exemption is given on a particular product, goods or services. And when I say conditional exemption, means if a particular supplier of goods and services is fulfilling that condition, then only he will be eligible for exemption. Otherwise, he will not get that exemption. So just remember, students, exemptions can be given only by the government through the recommendation of GST Council by issuing a notification. Okay, either absolutely, that is 100% exemption can be given, or conditional. Conditional means depending upon the fulfillment of condition. If the supplier fulfills that condition, he will get an exemption. Otherwise, he will not be applicable for the exemption. Now, let me give you all an example of absolute exemption. See, government has exempted GST on supply of unbranded products, unpacked products. Like if it is unbranded rice, which has been sold in the grocery shop, that is not liable to GST. But if delegate, that is a branded product, right? Delegate rice, if that has been sold, GST is applicable on that. So absolute means 100% exemption is given on unbranded products. This is just an example which I'm giving for absolute condition. What is the difference between absolute and conditional? An example for conditional is government has given exemptions to hotels. It is given an exemption to guest house. It has given exemption to clubs which are providing lodging facilities and which is having a declared tariff, that is declared charges, which is less than 1,000 per day. So any hotel or any guest house, any club which is providing lodging facilities and the tariff per day is, if it is less than 1,000 rupees, then they need not charge GST. If the tariff rate for that particular hotel room is more than 1,000 rupees, then GST will be applicable. So this is conditional. If any hotel is fulfilling the condition of charging less than 1,000 rupees, they will be eligible for exemption. If they are not fulfilling that condition and they're charging more than 1,000 rupees per day, then it is they are not fulfilling that condition, and therefore they will not be liable for GST exemption. So government can grant exemption either by notification, which I've already explained, or by special order. Now, what do you mean by special order? This special order exemption can be given only in public interest and only under exceptional circumstances. So where the government may grant exemption on the supply of goods and services only on the recommendation of GST Council, that is very important, under exceptional nature, okay, which is subject to public interest. Now let me give you an example for this. Many a times what happens is the government is in emergency situation. Like suppose if there is floods in Kerala, so it is an emergency situation, and now government cannot wait for issuing the notification. So government will give an exemption by a special order that in the state of Kerala there will be no GST levied on a notified goods or services. So there will be exemption. So by special order, government will issue exemption only if it is an exceptional nature, if it is an emergency situation that is in public interest. Otherwise, normally the government will grant exemption only by issuing the notification. So exemptions can be given by the government either on supply of goods or services. So exemptions are given by on both goods as well as services. So students, have you understood section number 11? Yes, students.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so
Yes, ma'am.
let us move ahead. Let us see which are those items on which exemptions are being provided in case of goods as well as in case of services. So section 11 subsection 1 talks about goods exempt from tax. So notified goods are exempt. Government has notified certain goods which are exempt. So only those goods which the government notifies on the recommendation of GST Council, either by issuing notification or by special order, only those notified goods are exempt. Everyday items are usually covered and included in the list of exempt items. For example, unbranded atta, maida, basin, the daily items, the daily necessity items are exempt under GST. Next, unpacked food grains, milk, eggs, curd, lassi, fresh vegetables, all these which are necessity items, which are not branded, which are not packed, those items or those goods are exempt from tax. Next, section 11 subsection 2, let us understand the services that are exempt from tax. So there are 90 services that are exempt from tax, but out of 90 I have just picked the important ones, okay, which are exempt from tax. So there are charitable and religious activity related services. So when any services is relating to charitable and religious purposes, those are exempt from tax and no GST will be levied on such services. Agricultural related services exempt from tax. Education services, when you all pay fees, college fees, do they charge GST? No. So education services also exempt from tax. Healthcare services exempt from tax. Services provided by the government, if any services is provided by the government, exempt from tax. Construction services, passenger transport services, goods transport services, right to admission to various events, services by an unincorporated body or non-profit entity, other exempt services, banking and financial services. In this, other exempt services are all those services that are not covered here out of those 90 in the list. Banking and financial services, life insurance, business services, services provided specified bodies, general insurance, business services, business facilitator, services provided to the government, leasing services, legal services, sponsorship of sports event, skill development services, performance by an artist. So all these services are exempt from tax and no GST is levied on such services. Students, when I give you all the notes, in your notes I will specify, like if it is education services, what are those services covered under the education services which will be exempt from tax. So in your notes in detail I will be providing each service, and under that service what are the different services that are exempt from tax. That is self-explanatory. In case if you'll, after giving notes, in case if you'll have any doubts, you can come back to me, but all these are self-explanatory. So moving ahead, so have you all understood what is an exempt supply and what are the different exemptions given by the government for goods and for services? Yes, students?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So let us move ahead. This is just for your revision. Section 9, students, I had spoken about levy and collection of tax. So in this, I had told you all that Section 9 is divided into 5 subsections, which is normal charge, forward charge, petroleum products, RCM of specified supplies, RCM of unregistered supplies, and e-commerce operators. Now, why am I showing this slide? Because this slide is related to persons liable to pay tax, which we'll be seeing in the succeeding slides. Students, petroleum products and RCM for unregistered supplies, I'm not going to cover. Reason being these are at present not applicable. Like if you see petroleum products, GST as on today is not applicable on these 5 products. It will be applicable on a date that will be notified by the government later. So this is at present not applicable, as well as RCM for unregistered supplies. So if I am a supplier and I am unregistered, and I am supplying the goods or services to a registered person, then who is supposed to pay GST? That particular purchaser is supposed to pay GST. So this also, though it is there in the provisions, as on today, this is not applicable. As on today, this provision is not brought into effect. Though it is there in the provisions, this is not brought into effect.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Some students are waiting.
Okay. I can't see any students waiting as on my screen. There is no one, Vishal, that I can see on my screen. So let me move ahead. Okay. So what was I telling? Section 9, where we will be seeing forward charge, we will be seeing RCM of specified supplies and e-commerce operators. Why am I not taking petroleum products and RCM for unregistered supplies? Because as on today, these provisions are not in effect. They are there, but it is not put in effect. Okay. So why did I specifically gave the previous slide was because persons liable to pay tax. Who are the persons liable to pay tax to the government? So there are three types of persons that are liable to pay tax to the government. One will be the supplier. If the supplier is liable to pay tax to the government, it becomes the forward charge. One is the recipient, and if the recipient is liable to pay tax to the government, it comes out as reverse charge mechanism. And one is e-commerce operator. So there are three persons who are liable to pay tax to the government. One is the supplier, one is the recipient, and one is e-commerce operators. Now let us first understand forward charge. I had already explained, but this is just little in depth. See, so under GST law, as we know, student, generally the supplier, who is the supplier? Who sells the goods or services. Usually what the supplier does, he collects tax from the recipient. Now who's recipient? Again, he's a buyer or customer of the goods or services or both, and pays tax to the government. So what the supplier does, the supplier collects the tax from the recipient and pays the tax to the government. Okay, so here what is happening is, indirectly the tax is paid by the recipient. So, and when the tax is paid by the supplier to the government, it is called as a forward charge. So this is normally what takes place in the GST. But for few such cases that is notified by the government, due to administrative difficulties, government is saying that no, the supplier should not pay the tax to me. The recipient should be directly liable to pay tax to the government. So what are those specified supplies? Let us see in the succeeding slides. Next is e-commerce operators, as I told you all, and I also gave an example. Suppose now we take the example of Flipkart. Suppose you want to purchase a cell phone on Flipkart. Suppose you all want to purchase a Samsung cell phone on Flipkart. So what do you all do? You all go to the Flipkart platform, to that particular app. You all purchase a Samsung cell phone, and then you get the delivery of the Samsung cell phone. Now, can you all tell me who is the recipient here? It is you, because you are purchasing. So you become the purchaser, customer, or recipient. Now, who is the supplier? The supplier is a Samsung company. Okay. Well, what is Flipkart doing? Flipkart is providing a platform, electronic platform to Samsung company to sell its products. So your e-commerce operator is not the Samsung company, not you, but it is the Flipkart who is the e-commerce operators. So in case of e-commerce operators, the liability to pay tax is not on Samsung company. He is the supplier, not on you. You are the recipient, but it is on the e-commerce operators. That is, the Flipkart company is supposed to pay the tax to the government. So I hope you all have understood what is e-commerce operators. They are just providing a electronic platform for the suppliers to sell their products or services. So in case of any e-commerce operators, the liability to pay tax is neither on the supplier, neither on the recipient, it is on the e-commerce operators. So these three are the persons who are liable to pay tax under GST. So they are called as taxable persons. So taxable persons are those persons who are liable to pay tax under GST. So now let us see what are those supplies that are notified under RCM. That means under which situation the recipient is liable to pay tax to the government. So first, let us see supplies of goods taxable under RCM, reverse charge, supply of goods where tax is payable by recipient. So goods like cashew nuts, not shelled or peeled, BD wrapper leaves, tobacco leaves, raw cotton when supplied by an agriculturist to a registered person. So when an agriculturist is supplying goods like cashew nuts, BD wrappers, tobacco leaves, raw cotton from a uh, to a unregistered person. Now here the supplier is agriculturist, the recipient is a registered person. Now who will be liable to pay tax to the government? It will be the recipient, that is the registered person who has purchased these products. Next, in case of supply of lottery, when it is supplied by the state government, union territory or local authority to a lottery distributor or selling agent. So when lotteries are supplied by government and it is supplied to a lottery distributor, who is the recipient? Lottery distributor. Who is supposed to pay tax? It is the lottery distributor. So these are the list of goods that are specified by the government on which the tax is to be paid by the recipient. Apart from this, if there is any other goods, it will be taxed as per the forward charge. Next, silk yarn when supplied by manufacturer of silk yarn to any registered person. Next, used goods, used vehicles, seized and confiscated goods, sold and used goods, waste and scrap when it is supplied by a central government, state government, union territory or any local authority to any registered person. So let us understand this slide more correctly, okay, by this particular slide. So see here students, these are all the supplies where forward charge will not be applicable, where reverse charge will be applicable. So first one is, we have already seen, but I'm just putting in this format. Nature of supply of goods, where they are purchase of cashew nuts not shelled or peeled, where the supplier of goods or services is agriculturist, recipient of goods and services any registered person who is liable to pay tax to the government. Thus this any registered person, agriculturist will not pay tax to the government. Then purchase of BD wrappers, again supplier is agriculturist, recipient is registered person who is liable to pay tax, registered person. Purchase of tobacco leaves, agriculturist is a supplier, any registered person is a recipient who is liable to pay tax to the government, registered person. Purchase of silk yarn, the person who manufactures silk yarn is a supplier, any registered person is a recipient, tax liability falls on the registered person. Purchase of raw cotton, supplier is agriculturalist, recipient is any registered person. The liability to pay under reverse charge falls under any registered person. Purchase of lottery ticket, if the supplier is state government, central government, union territory or local authority, and the recipient is a selling agent or lottery distributor, the tax liability falls on the lottery distributor. Purchase of used vehicles, seized and confiscated goods, old and used goods, waste and scrap, if the supplier is central, state, union territory, local authority, recipient any registered person, person liable to pay tax will be any registered person. Purchase of priority sector lending certificate, if the supplier is banks or financial institution and recipient is any registered person, then any registered person will be liable to pay tax. Purchase of cement, if the supplier is any person and if the recipient is promoter or the builder, then the builder is liable to pay tax. And goods transport agency. Students, goods transport agency is an agency which helps in transporting the goods from one particular location to another particular location. Usually the registered person, goods transport agency, is the supplier and the registered person will be the recipient. But if the goods transport agency is going to pay tax on the forward charge at 12%, then RCM will not be applicable. Only if it is not going to pay tax at 12% on forward charge, then reverse charge will be applicable on goods transport agency. Next. Now let us understand supply of services which are taxable under reverse charge. So students, now we have seen supply of goods. Now let us see what are those services which, if provided, the recipient is liable to pay tax and not the supplier. So first, legal services of an advocate. So if an advocate is providing services, okay, either it can be a senior advocate or a firm of advocates, and if it is providing services to any business entity in taxable territory, then who is liable to pay tax? The person who is liable to pay tax is the business entity that is located in the taxable territory. Next, let us understand next type of services which is liable to reverse charges. Services of an arbitral tribunal to a business entity. So who is providing services? An arbitral tribunal to whom? To a business entity. Now what is arbitral tribunal? They are the arbitrator who are providing the services of resolving the disputes in a business entity. If there is any dispute, the arbitral tribunal will help in resolving the dispute. So they are providing those services. So in that case also, the business entity who is receiving those services is liable to pay tax under reverse charge. Next is sponsorship services. If sponsorship services are provided by any person to any body, corporate or partnership firm located in taxable territory, then who is liable to pay tax? Those recipient who's receiving those sponsorship services. Next, director services. A director of a company or body corporate is usually a service provider that is supplying his services, okay? Whereas the company or body corporate is a person who is receiving the services of the director. So in director services also, the company is liable to pay tax, that is the recipient. Next is services of insurance agent. Now, in case of insurance agent, an insurance agent is providing services to the insurance company. So, insurance agent is a service provider. Insurance company is a service receiver. So, again, service receiver is required to pay tax under GST in respect of insurance agent. Services of recovery agent. A recovery agent is a person who usually helps the bank to recover the amount, debt amount from its customers. So a recovery agent provides its services to a banking company or financial or a non-banking financial company located in taxable territory. So in case of recovery agent also, the tax burden lies on the banking company who is receiving the services of recovery agent and not the recovery agent who is providing the service. Next, services of overseas committee. So if any services are provided by overseas committee constituted by Reserve Bank of India, and if it is providing services to Reserve Bank of India, then Reserve Bank of India is required to pay GST and not the overseas committee. Next, services of an author, music composer, photographer, artist, or the like by the way of transfer or permitting the use or enjoyment of a copyright, which is covered under this section. So when an author is providing the services, or when a music composer is providing his services, or a photographer or an artist is providing the services to a publisher, music company, or producer which is located in the taxable territory, then who is liable to pay tax, GST? It is the publisher or the producer who is receiving those services and not the author, music composer or photographer who is providing those services. So these were the certain list of services where the tax is paid by the recipient and not by the supplier. So students, all you need to know that who are the persons liable to pay tax under GST. It is those persons who are covered under forward charge, those suppliers, persons who are covered under reverse charge, and e-commerce operators. So either the supplier will pay tax, either the recipient will pay tax in case of notified goods and services, and either the e-commerce operators will pay tax based on the supply of goods and services happening on an e-commerce platform. So when I say forward charge, students, it is only those persons who are registered under GST. So registration, we have a separate topic, as I mentioned in module number 4, we have a separate topic. So that is why I am not clubbing it now. So in forward charge, we will be seeing who are those persons who are required to take registration under GST and they become taxable persons under forward charge. So is this clear, students?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So just in short, let me tell you all that in forward charge, which we have seen, they are the taxable persons, as you know, who are supposed to take GST registration is mandatory for them. Suppose if I'm a supplier and if I'm not registered under GST, my turnover is not exceeding the prescribed limit. So even if I'm supplying the goods, I need not charge tax. Because I'm not registered under GST, I'm not liable to pay tax under GST because I am a supplier whose turnover is below the prescribed limit. So in detail, we will be seeing in module number 4, but just let me tell you all in short. So any businesses whose turnover is exceeding 40 lakhs in case of goods and 20 lakhs in case of services are mandatorily required to take GST registration. Or any person who is making interstate supply. Now, irrespective of the turnover, if any person is making interstate supply, even if the turnover is below the prescribed limit, still the persons who are making the supply of interstate, they are required to take registration under GST. That means they are the persons liable to pay tax under the forward charge. Then gradual taxable person. Yesterday we saw what is a gradual taxable person who does not have a fixed place of business, okay, in a particular state, and he gives his business in a state where he does not have a fixed place of business. He takes his registration as a gradual taxable person. He also is required to pay tax under GST under the forward charge. Then we see non-resident taxable person also yesterday. Non-resident taxable person is a person who occasionally supplies goods and services in India, but does not have a fixed place of business establishment in India. If he is providing so, he also is a person liable to pay tax under forward charge. Then an agent principal agent relationship. So that agent of a supplier is also liable to pay tax. So all these persons are falling under the normal charge. So not only those persons whose turnover exceeds the prescribed limit, but also those persons like interstate, who's making an interstate supply, who is an agent of a supplier, who is a gradual taxable person, who's a non-resident taxable person. They also are those persons, even if their turnover does not exceed the prescribed limit, they will have to pay tax under the forward charge. Now, much in more detail regarding this registration, we will be seeing in module number 4. So students, have you all understood today's lecture? Today's lecture, we dealt with what is exemptions, what are the goods and services that are exempt from tax, and we have seen that who are the persons who are liable to pay tax under GST.